You're listening to Song Suggestion Saturday, brought to you by AK.
Welcome everyone to the very first edition of Song Suggestion Saturdays, a series where every Saturday night I talk about 5 songs I was given by you all, the watchers, and analyze what makes each of them so unique. They can be songs from any medium such as film and video games, or just songs from the popular music spectrum. In the very first edition, I received mostly songs I'd never heard before, so it gave me a completely unbiased approach to my analysis. The way I choose the set songs was by using the wheel of randomness that would randomly select a user, and then based on the said user, if they suggested more than one song, I assigned each song in their list a number from 1 until the number of songs they commented, and then generated a said random number using the wizardly machine known as Google. So with all that said and done, let us begin. So we start with Run by the Foo Fighters. For those who don't know, the Foo Fighters actually descend from Nirvana, in which guitarist Dave Grohl was a part of. This song was the first single taken off their newest album, Concrete and Gold. It's a song that fools you into thinking it's metal because of the texture of the vocal performance and that blaring and thick guitar sound in the mix. Speaking of which, that drum performance ain't so bad either, and they use the cymbals as a nice cushion for that blaring guitar sounds that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of that crash sound and alignment to those power chords. But with hard rock songs though, and I said this in my past Q&As, but with hard rock songs, the melodies are usually not as good, and unless you're a band like Led Zeppelin, it's harder to put together a melodic hard rock song. But that being said though, what Dave Grohl does with his voice in this song is pretty awesome. He's half screaming and half singing in this one, and he actually transitions from screaming to singing within the same line he's singing. And the transition is really cool from line to line. Going back to that drum performance, I mean, yeah, even that's melodic in a sense because of the way the drummer, Taylor Hawkins, uses the toms to kind of invoke that really intense environment present throughout the song. In fact, the singing and drumming are easily the highlight here. In terms of the negatives, I feel that the introduction to the song is rather pale, and while it's actually nice and gentle, and I'm not a fan from these hard rock songs especially, from going from soft ballady-like tones to sudden explosive songs, unless it's a long gradual change, and here, they use the tom-oriented drumming to change the texture to the hard rock section, but it does happen rather too quickly for my liking. Even with that flaw though, there's still so much to like, such as the lyrics. I mean, there's not a whole lot of content to it, but the message is really well conveyed because of that one line repeated throughout the song, and I think all the words tie into that one phrase. In terms of expression, I think this one really flies on all cylinders. My rating for this one is certainly 4 stars out of 5. It's powerful musically, it's very likable as a hard rock song, and it does a lot of things right. And from the Foo Fighters songs that I've heard, yeah man, this one is definitely among their best. I mean, it's pretty incredible that even after 20 years, they're still churning out great songs like this one. Up next is Muscle Museum by another popular rock band, Muse. Their song Knights of Sidonia actually made my greatest songs of all time list, so going into this song I definitely had somewhat of a high level of expectation. Now the first thought that came to my mind was the interaction between the bass and what appears to be a keyboard riff. In fact, this is one of the grooviest songs out there, quite literally, because that's what this song appears to have been written to be. It has quiet to loud transitions, and the quiet sections allow for the listener to kind of sink into that really groovy bass drone. If you've ever heard Indian music or even raga rock from the 60s, most of them do utilize a drone in the background, and I can guarantee there is some kind of influence in this one. When we do get to the loud parts, it's actually a rather underwhelming transition, but it still works because unlike the last song I talked about, I feel that there's more of a casual transition here, which again, all relies on those bass notes. The lead guitar actually doesn't make much of an impact until the chorus, since all the instruments kind of blast in that section. In terms of the melody, Matt Bellamy the singer has a very nice melodic voice, and he seems to be much better at utilizing it during soft backing rather than singing over loud, flamboyant sections. As a result, I can't say the chorus is anything too special for me here, but the verses and instrumental bits of the song are very good. I think they're really creative with how the song flows, going from quiet to loud to groovy, and then back to quiet and so forth. And for an alternative rock song, it's got quite a lot of appeal for anyone, which is normally a trait that you'd find in pop music. I can assume that that's why Muse chose this track as a single, although it was the third one released. I did a bit of research after hearing this one, and I did realize that this song was technically one of their first songs they ever released, and personally that's quite a good start. Some bands kinda start too ambitious for their own good in hopes of becoming everything at once, but I think Muse has a good vision they stick to in this song. They aren't trying to be wacky or dabble in anything too unexpected, and I think that this song personally has a great appeal to it for a wide range audience. If you like ballads, you'll like the soft and melodic verses here. If you like the hard rock stuff, you'll probably enjoy the choruses. And if you're like me and you're a fan of clever arrangements, this one also keeps you satisfied. Now rating this one is rather difficult, but I'll settle with a 3.5 out of 5. I think it lacks a memorable chorus, and the lyrics to this one are rather, I'd say, ambiguous, which for a love song is rather puzzling. And my rating might seem rather harsh, but it is the debut song, and most of the time debut songs will be a little rough in the patch, but even then, this one still has quite a lot of appeal to it, regardless of what genre you're into. Next up is Roxane by The Police. I just got done talking about a really groovy song, and we're right back into the very groovy material. This is the first song I've talked about today, which I've actually heard before several times, and you probably guessed is from Rock Band. It's like if the Bee Gees suddenly had the desire to go reggae, because Sting's voice here is certainly in that alley. It's high-pitched, it's so strange yet so perfect at the same time. And along with that bass and percussion here, the melody in the song is just inescapable. Also, similar to the previous song, this was on The Police's debut album as well. And despite that really inescapable bass melody, it only got to the 30s on the Billboard charts, which, while you could argue is because The Police were a new British band, could also be because of punk rock and disco being the more trendy genres at the time, over even reggae music. Because I've already heard this track before, I can't be surprised by anything. And yeah, it's a really phenomenal song, and probably my personal favorite one by The Police that I've heard so far. Ratings wise, I'd probably give it a 4.5 out of 5, and everyone's praised this one to death, so me doing it right now certainly isn't the first time.
Rebels are we, though heavy our hearts shall always be. Ah, no ball or chain, no prison shall keep greater rebels of a sacred heart.
Out of all the songs I've talked about so far, this next one is definitely the least popular out of the bunch. Rebels of the Sacred Heart by Flogging Molly. Released in 2002, this song is actually a Celtic punk song, and probably hard rock as well because of the really loud and upbeat instrumentation led by a powerful electric guitar pounding drums. Out of all the songs I've talked about though, this one is probably the most ambitious and unconventional one on here. Not only because it's Irish in nature, but because it actively breaks the boundaries of structure and kind of goes progressive territory on us a couple times. It's both hit and miss in this aspect because sometimes the transitions come out of nowhere, and when that happens, a casual music fan might feel rather lost in the ambition of the recording. Where this song does succeed though is how effortless it sells into these two styles. The calm traditional sections use an accordion and it really accompanies the lead vocal perfectly. At times I actually get a hint of Bob Dylan in the tonality of the song's timbre. Instead of a harmonica though, this one mostly sticks to the accordion during its low-key sections. During the hard rock sections, this one really shines instrumentally and the power of this song is shown off. The theme of the lyrics also perfectly complements these sections because the verses are more downbeat, but the chorus quickly swings it around and we get a really nice flow into it as a result. I think that this one lacks a little in the fundamentals, but for any casual fans who are really into these Broadway and ambitious tunes, this song is a real treat. It's quite a far journey away from our traditional perception of music, but man, like it says in its title, the song is quite sacred in itself. This is another tough song to rate, but I'd give it a 3.5 out of 5 because it does still have some noticeable flaws with the transitions being choppy and the lack of a strong melody during the hard rock sections. This one though is easily a fantastic anthem, and I can imagine a sing-along type atmosphere here. It was quite a fun listen. Wrapping up the first installment of Song Selection Saturdays, we get another rock tune, Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult. That band is pretty much known for 3 songs. Don't Fear the Reaper, which is one of my favorite songs of all time, Burnin' For You, which is a classic rock staple, and this song. It's got quite the fierce guitar riff, and it just seems to take off from there. Out of all the songs I've tackled so far, the melody to this one is certainly the best out of the bunch to me, at least. It's got a very nice flow to it during the verses, and the concept is lighthearted enough for you can kind of just smile alongside the various references in the lyrics. The instrumentation in this one though is what really does me in. The bass and drums both do a phenomenal job of providing a blanket around some really exceptional vocal melodies, which are double tracked from what I hear. And most importantly, the lead guitar. The lead guitar in this song is very charismatic, from some very distorted string bending to some high-flying solos in the middle of the track. The best part is easily how well the two go hand in hand. Throughout the verses especially, I'm just bopping along to the really fantastic groove established in the song, and while I'm not really a fan of that vocal experimentation they do around the 2-minute mark, it doesn't bother me enough to to ruin the enjoyment. This one objectively probably isn't a timeless song, I'd say, because it really doesn't do anything to hook someone who isn't a rock fan into it. But if you are a rock fan, you will fall in love with this track. That's a guarantee. So yeah, this one is definitely one of my favorites of the 5 I was given. Rating wise, I'd say it's a 3.5 out of 5 song. And it's definitely a good song, although what hurts it to me is how restrictive it is to, I'd say, really only appealing to those rock music lovers that I'd say. Well, that concludes the first edition of Song Suggestion Saturdays. Before I end things off, let me rank the songs I talked about today going from worst to best. The worst out of the bunch by default is Muscle Museum by Muse, and it's really by default because it's not at all a bad song. The melody to me though just kind of felt weaker compared to the other songs I talked about that received a 3.5 out of 5. But make no mistake about it, this song was still one hell of a debut for Muse, and in a few years they'd go from Muscle Museum to Knights of Sidonia. Quite a jump. Number 4 is Rebels of the Sacred Heart for the pure reason that it's just so incredibly far out of the spectrum. I love the cheeriness and section to this one despite the transitions and basics of the track being a little bit abrupt. Number 3 is Godzilla, and it's mostly just from me loving the personality of the instrumentation to bits. It also has a piece in it that I'm not too fond of, but the song is certainly very appealing to me personally. And yeah, gotta separate the songs based on personal preference in this case. Just missing number 1 was Run by Foo Fighters, which really surprised me on how interesting of a track it is. Dave Grohl at age 49 still knows how to write very compelling music, and despite a mixed bag introduction for me, 90% of the song is filled with very fascinating music and texture. You can't ask for anything more from rock music than that. And at number 1 is Roxane, which is incredibly groovy, rhythmic, and very much why reggae can mix with any genre. The instrumentation in that song alone can get anyone into it, and out of all the songs I talked about, I'd say it's easily the most timeless of the bunch. So congratulations to Negan for suggesting the song I found the best, but more impressive is Shivanda's suggestion that made number 2 since I hadn't heard it before. To wrap it up, let me just state that the user who suggests the highest ranked song, which I've never heard of before, will win the prize at the end of December. The prize being a month of core membership on DeviantArt, so keep suggesting new songs and you may be able to dethrone Shavanda next week. This has been AK, and thank you all so much for your suggestions, and see you next Saturday for the next edition of Song Suggestion Saturdays.
You're listening to Song Suggestion Saturday, brought to you by AK.